Okay, hi everybody. Thank you so much for attending and participating in CU Data Week. We will have sessions. We have another session tomorrow and then another four sessions next week at 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So tomorrow is our seminar on how to meet with a statistician. And then we also have office hours on this Friday and next Friday, the 14th at noon. I'm going to add the link into the chat here for you to register. It goes to our website where you can register to attend those Friday office hours, as well as any other seminars that you would be interested in. Next week is going to be more advanced seminars on advanced reporting in R, advanced data visualization in R, how to use macros in R, and then how to create a database that statisticians will love by me using REDCap. So this is so I would recommend coming to that one. That is going to be next Thursday. It's a good companion to this introduction to REDCap. Please stay till the end of this seminar. I'm going to be attaching a link to an attendance survey. We want to get your feedback, what you liked about this, what you would want to see from us next year. And once you complete it, it'll enter you into a raffle to win one of five, I think, $75 Amazon gift cards. And every seminar that you attend, it enters into the raffle again. So if you attend all 8, you're in that raffle 8 times so that you have the chance to win a higher chance to win a gift card. And then I'm going to put another link in here in case you didn't already have access to it. It's access to the Dropbox. This has the information for all the materials for every single seminar that we have. So it'll have the presentation that we're doing today, as well as code and data sets for our past presentations that we've had and the presentations going forward. We'll have everything for next week added by end of day Friday. So you can use that Dropbox to get all the materials. And without further ado, I want to introduce Chloe and Sean. They are part of the REDCap group, and they will be doing the presentation today on REDCap.
Thank you so much, Samantha. So I'll go ahead and get us started. Can everyone see my screen okay? Perfect. All right, good to know. Let me go ahead. I do want to drop one thing for you first. So let me go ahead and drop this link. We'll be referencing our help center on occasion when we're making points throughout this presentation. So I just want to make sure that you have that as a resource directly. It'll also be located in our slides along with links to various articles in our help center. But essentially, if you have any questions about REDCap, about getting an account in REDCap, you can find not only articles in that help center, but also a method of submitting a ticket to our team. So that's the best way to get in touch with us in case you have any questions. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. All right, so with a brief introduction, let me actually go ahead and just say I'm Chloe. I'm actually a fairly new REDCap administrator here at the University of Colorado, but I've been using REDCap for years in an advanced capacity. So I started here last year in August. I'd like to throw it over to my colleague, Sean, to give a brief introduction as well.
Thanks, Chloe. Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Sullivan. I've been the REDCap administrator for about a year and 2 months now. A lot of you are probably familiar with my predecessor, Amanda Miller, if you have worked with REDCap in any capacity. So I worked under her, and yeah, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off if you want to go to the next slide, Chloe. Right, so while I imagine a lot of you attending already know what REDCap is, at least to some extent, I just do want to provide a brief overview. Right, so REDCap is a HIPAA-compliant electronic data capture tool, which offers a number of different functions to simplify and streamline data collection. So these functions include things like field validation, import and export tools, branching/skip logic, data piping, and a handful of different ways to distribute participant-facing instruments. These are known as surveys.
Perfect. And I will take this opportunity to point out that, again, in this slide, you'll see at the bottom a hyperlink with a little question mark. If you have any questions about some things that we discuss on these slides today, there will be links to articles in the Help Center that are relevant to the topic that we're covering on that particular slide. So feel free to access those. All right, so then how do you access REDCap? So first we'll go over who is allowed to use REDCap. So REDCap at the University of Colorado is supported by the Colorado Clinical and Translational Sciences Institute, CCTSI. That's the group that we are a part of, Sean and myself. And if you are a member of the CCTSI, or your study's been approved by the IRB, or at least you have some sort of documented waiver, then all REDCap related costs are covered by the CCTSI. So you're considered a free user. We can also support external collaborators. So let's say you have a multi-site study, we can support those external users. They just won't be granted the same level of permissions per our licensing agreement with Vanderbilt, the creators of REDCap. Our instance of REDCap, which you can think of as our database, is separate from other institutions' databases for REDCap. So our instance is intended for use with IRB-reviewed research projects and projects in support of research. We do allow for, test projects, getting a feel for REDCap, trying to create something that your study will later use, or projects used for education. I threw a link in there. If you'd like to become a CCTSI member, you can join for free. And again, a link to a relevant article here.
Awesome. And so I do want to cover, I know Chloe already hit on this, but a big selling point for folks on REDCap is the free part. Right? So REDCap services come at no cost to our end users, and the only requirement to gain access to REDCap is that you complete one of our 2 training modules. So we offer 2 different modes of training, one that we call basic and another that we call full. So the basic training goes over the basics of REDCap, as you would imagine, and this will give you limited privileges to REDCap, right? So you're able to do data entry, view data, stuff like that, while we also do offer the full account training. The full account training takes about 2 hours to complete, and this will grant you basically any permission that you could have within REDCap, including project creation permissions, barring that you do qualify under the Vanderbilt licensing agreement that we can give you those permissions. In most cases, the folks who are attending here today, you will be able to get those permissions. Another big part here that I do want to highlight, I know we're hitting on those links multiple times. We're really proud of our Help Center. If you want to click on that link at the very bottom after this presentation, you can see a whole article about how to get a REDCap account, including links to our online trainings.
All right. And with all of that admin information out of the way, we'll go ahead and get started with a live demo. So I'll pop out of my slides here so that we can look at it in action. Where I am right now is the REDCap homepage. Up here, you can see my header. I have a new project permission, which is because I would have a full account. So that is a permission that is only permitted for those that take a full account training. So we'll walk through the process of creating a project, but just know that that is a permission you can only have if you complete a full account training and you fall under one of those institutions that's listed on that slide. So I'll select to create a new project, and I will just make this testing 2/5/2025 as my project name. I'll select research. What's great about this is you can document this information so that later down the line, let's say you have a lot of staff turnover or something, this can help us locate your project later when new people come in and now there has been lost access to the project. So it's really important that we have this information when you're working with a research project. So essentially, it would just give you the opportunity to list name of PI, the email, the name of the PI as cited in publications. So if you have a name difference there, the IRB number, which is really helpful when we're trying to locate the project, and then any sort of indicator of what your project is covering. You can also add it to a project folder. So this has to do with how you can organize your homepage. And then you can also choose a project creation option. So you have a few options here to choose from. You can begin off of an empty project that doesn't give you anything to start out with. That is a completely blank slate. You can also upload a REDCap project XML file. So that would be if you, for example, want to copy the way that a project is structured from another institution. So let's say another institution has all of the instruments, all of the potential events, if you're looking at a longitudinal project that you would need, then you could upload that XML file of that project and have it in front of you in our instance or in our database. You also have this clinical data mart. That's something that we do not have access to with the UCD instance of REDCap. You can also use a template. So this is what I will be covering today. You can use the CoMERB eConsent template. We do recommend people at least start out with that, especially if you are going through the full consent process with folks. So you can use that. That'll give you a CoMERB approved initial template to work off of with a few instruments that will cover the different items that you need to collect during the consent process. Oops. So I'm going to bump this over to practice so we don't have to enter all that information. And that creates my new project. From here, you can navigate to various different locations in your project to design your project, pull data from your project, manage the records in your project. For now, I just thought I'd give you an overview of Designer, since that tends to be people's first interaction with their REDCap project, right, is building those instruments, building those forms. So you can find Designer over to your left under Project Home and Design here. And you'll open that, and you can see these are the forms that I was given because I chose that template. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to bump over to a test project that I already have set up for us so that we can cover some interesting things about the Designer. So this is a test project I already had set up based off of that CoMERB template. And I have a couple of instruments that I've already started building just so that we can get a quick overview of what everything looks like. So first, let me go ahead and I will pop into one of these forms and I'll just show you what it looks like when you start creating a field. So an instrument would represent something like a form. Let's say that you have a paper form that you're handing out to your participants to complete, and a single one of those forms would be translated into a single instrument here. So I'll open this example. You can see here that I have several fields already built. Each of these would be some sort of prompt and response choice. I'll pop down to the bottom just so we can look at what this add field looks like. When I open that, you get a pop-up and you can select from various different field types. We'll look at what each of those looks like, but you have a text box that would be a short answer, notes box, long answer. You can create calculated fields with calculations. Multiple choice fields that are either from a drop-down or radio buttons. You have the option of selecting checkboxes in case there's more than one answer available that can be chosen. Yes or no's, trues or false. That's essentially, you could build these with standard radio button or drop-downs, but this will essentially hard code what raw values you can use, and we'll look at what that looks like in a second. Signature, so think of your consents. You can collect an electronic signature in REDCap. File upload, in case someone would need to upload some sort of file, or some people will use it to collect like a CV or something like that. A slider, we'll look at what that looks like. Descriptive text and begin new section. Those are much easier to show you what they do rather than what they look like when we're working on them in this editor here. But if I select one of these, let's say multiple choice radio buttons, then I'm presented with several options. For the field label, I can indicate whatever my prompt would be. So what is your favorite day of the week? That would be my prompt. And then I can enter a variable name. This has to be snake case, which is lowercase letters, no spaces. If you wanted spaces, you would represent those with underscores. So for example, fave day of week, and that is our variable name. We can also select whether this question is going to be required in order to move forward in the process. So if it's not required, then that could be left blank. If it is required, then they cannot proceed to either the next page, the next survey, submit their survey, unless they've indicated an answer on that question. And then there's also a question about whether it's an identifier. If you mark fields as identifiers in your project, they can help you protect that information based off of user rights in your project, right? So you can control who sees that particular information to better protect your PHI or PII. You can also add various choices. So this gets to an important point with radio buttons, checkboxes, drop downs. Anything that gives you a set number of choices is that REDCap recognizes a raw value associated with your response choice. So let's say I use 1 to indicate Monday, 2, Tuesday, and so on. This is going to be essentially what REDCap remembers is that raw value, and then that field label is the representation, the response representation for that. So I can save that as a new field, and you can see that I now have those radio buttons available to me. So that's what it looks like in general to create a new field. There are some fun things that you can do when you're working on fields in a particular instrument. So this is a new feature that was actually introduced just at the end of last year, but it is this quick modify fields option. So let's say that I created an additional question down here. What is your favorite what's your favorite day of the week, part 2? Let's say I wanted to change response choices to both of these fields at the same time because they're asking essentially the same thing. Then I can use this quick modify fields option where I can just check off each of the fields and I can make some sort of modification to them both at the same time. I could do that by making them both required. They're already required. So for example, I could make them not required. Let's say that was an accident. I can check off as many as it needed, and I can select, I don't want them to be required. It's going to confirm with me. And you can see that little red text that indicated they were required is gone. If I open up one of these fields, it's no longer required. So it can make you a little bit faster working through. And I also just like to show people some of the fun functionality and not just some of the basic stuff, just so you can get a good feel of what it can be like as you start working in REDCap. Another thing that I wanted to show you is that more functionality that you can use is Control-G. This is also something that is newly introduced. If you select Control-G on any of your instruments in Designer, then it'll bring up this pop-up where you can select a field from any other instrument or the current instrument, and it will take you directly to that field. It's really nice if you're trying to navigate your project quickly. So let me try something like, we'll go to a really early form. This will pop me to a completely different form. So here we go. We've moved very quickly over to our other instrument. I really like that tool. I think that's a lot of fun. The last thing that I wanted to show you quickly with creating instruments and creating fields in Designer is that you can create individual instruments, and that's what this looks like. So if I create this instrument here, it'll create a blank slate for me to work with here. All right. So the next thing that I would like to show you is some basic branching logic before we look at how this looks on the front end. So if I pop into that form that we were in initially, I'll pop back to the bottom here. Actually going to delete our, let's use our quick modify, delete our fields. Now we just have these two questions down here. So this is going to be our branching logic example. Branching logic is going to give you the ability to conditionally reveal a field. So for example, we can use this question, which is what ice cream do you like? Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, or other. And then we can use a text box to collect whatever that other specify field would be. However, we don't want this text box to just be available at all times. So in that case, we would want to use branching logic. So if I select these little green arrows on the field, it'll open up my branching logic pop-up. Now you can write the syntax yourself, but if you're a beginner with REDCap, you can also use the drag and drop builder. This will give you the ability to essentially manually point and click what you need. So what I need is that if somebody selects other in ice cream, then I want this field to show. So I'm going to scroll down until I see ice cream equals other. 4 is the numeric representation of other. And then you can see that there is some syntax that's populated in my advanced section, and that's going to be the syntax that is needed in order to work with this branching logic. You can see that what is written in that syntax is the number 4. And again, this gets back at REDCap recognizing those raw values, not necessarily the label that you've given that response choice. So now I'll show you what this looks like on the front end, and we can take a peek at what that branching logic looks like in action. So I've given you a representation of what every single field looks like, field type, so that we can see how it works. So here at the top, this is a text box with no validation. It is required. That's why you see this little red text that says must provide value. If I tried to submit this, I'm going to get an error for those 2 fields that have the required text on it, saying that I need to provide a value for those. So it won't let me submit. So I'll enter some information here. So that has no validation. The next field, I have implemented validation. So this requires an email address. If I enter just E, nothing will work because it requires that it's within the email address format. So then I could enter a valid email. And now it will accept it. There's also number validated fields. So if I try to type anything other than a number, it won't let me. And then we have a calculated field. So this is a calculated field with some syntax that multiplies the above value by itself. So we have 9. And that will come out automatically. We have a notes box. So again, this is going to be the long form. So if I just let this go, you can also select to expand for an easier user interface. You can see this is introducing the bar here. I can hit expand. It'll expand it for me. This is a begin new section field. So as I mentioned, it's a lot easier to say what it does by showing you rather than looking at it in the editor. This literally will begin a new section. So it helps separate your forms into logical sections based off of your settings on your form. It can also be used to actually separate your form into multiple pages. This is what a drop-down field looks like. This is what a radio button field looks like. And then you have the checkbox field. So I can select multiple options here, but I can't with the others. This is a yes, no field. So the difference between this and a radio button field is that the raw values here are hard coded so that 1 is always yes and 0 is always no. And then same thing with true, false. True is always 1, false is always 0. This is what your signature field looks like. So I can leave a little signature there. I can upload a file here. This is also what the slider looks like. So based off of how the presentation's going, I could say it was terrible, or I could say it was incredible, or I could say it's probably somewhere more realistic like there. And you can add some sort of numeric representation for that. So this, for example, is going from 0 to 100 based off of the settings that I have in the field editor, but you can make modifications to that as needed. This is what is a descriptive text field. So once again, this is something that's easier to explain when you're looking at it. This field collects no information by technicality, right? This isn't a field that is collecting radio button information or anything. So the field itself cannot be referenced for data. However, the caveat to that is that you can collect data from other fields within a descriptive text field. So what that means is the data isn't saved to that particular field. It's still saved in the others, but you can embed it so that it looks a little bit nicer with your user interface, right? You do that by using curly brackets. I'll show you what that looks like on the designer side in just a second. You can see an example here where I use a table and I say, okay, let's say I'm conducting multiple tests for this patient. I can indicate the day and I can indicate the measurement here. And again, I can use validation to make sure that it is a number and that it is up to 2 decimal places. And then finally, this is our branching logic example. So you can see that that other text box is not available for us at the moment. If I select anything, it won't come up until I select other. And there you have that specify field. So that's what it looks like on the front end. Really fast, I'll show you what that embedding looks like. As I mentioned, those curly brackets. So you can actually see that this says contains embedded fields. This is a descriptive field that contains embedded fields, and you can see what fields are embedded. I've embedded them by essentially just pulling the variable name and plopping them into curly brackets. All right, so that concludes our designer portion. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so I can get our slides back up. And we'll just quick cover some general information about data collection. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about designer in your project, we can talk about how you can collect your data. So there's a couple of different methods of collecting data in your project, some of which you've already seen by me clicking around, but a lot of it will be covered more in depth by Sean here in just a minute. So methods that you can use to collect data in your project are data entry. So that's going to be data collection by the internal team alone. It requires a REDCap login to access forms that are data entry forms. You have surveys. So that's going to be things that collection by your participants. Essentially, they're sent by a publicly distributable link or QR code through email or SMS. We do have a vendor for SMS, but it does require a monthly subscription. There is an article link for that. And the invitations that you send, so let's say you're sending them via email or via SMS, those can be sent manually, or they can also be programmed to be sent after meeting specific designated conditions that you've set. One thing that I wanted to mention here too is just a feature spotlight for something that's a little bit more advanced, which is our e-consent framework. So our e-consent framework is essentially a new 2.0 version that covers versioning of your consent. So essentially what the e-consent framework does is it allows you to collect consent information from your participants in a more certified way. They're given an additional page where they can review all of their responses to their consent and certify that they agree that that is something that they have met, agreed to, and completed with you. And then that is automatically saved as a PDF in your file repository, which is a space in your REDCap project that holds files and can be programmed to receive things like PDFs of your participants' forms. So that's an extra layer of protection when collecting consents with participants that we really encourage folks to use. As I mentioned, they introduced a new versioning system, which allows you to version in a little bit of a cleaner way. We do have articles and videos that cover that information. So in case you'd like to access those, I have those linked in our table here. The last method of data collection would be importing. We won't cover the data import tool today, but just know that that is another method that you can get data into your project. So at this point, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Sean to cover some more information about data collection.
Thanks, Chloe. So I'm actually going to hop directly into a live demo as well. So give me just 1 second to get that screen share going. All right. And Chloe, can you just confirm that's showing up all right?
Sure can.
All right. Awesome. Wonderful. So I know we've talked a little bit back and forth about the different modes of data collection within REDCap already. I kind of wanted to give that a closer look and also give a glance at the e-consent template slash framework that we've been talking about. Right, so Chloe already kind of went through a survey, and right, the general message of a survey and the general intent is a survey is usually participant facing, right? So I can access my survey either through a public link if that's been enabled and configured properly. Alternatively, you can send unique links to participants, right? So a link has been sent directly to their email through one of the REDCap email functions, and they now have access to this instrument that we've crafted. Right, so I'll just go ahead and show you really quick, clicking through the instrument. I know Chloe's gone through field types and branching logic. If I go ahead, fill out some fields, perfect, and get a signature in there really quick. I'll go ahead, click next page. And this is where our e-consent framework plays in. Again, we're not looking at versioning today, but just a quick snapshot of what's going on here. We are actually able to have the participant view their responses, go ahead, review them. They also are able to download them in PDF format, and they can go ahead and they can certify that information, submit it. And that'll bring us to just a brief survey completion page that can also auto continue into other surveys. There's a lot of cool functions we have there. Right, so with survey view in mind, I want to talk about data entry forms. Right, so something important to note is that any instrument is automatically a data entry form. Surveys have to be enabled for an instrument. An instrument can be a data entry form and not be a survey. A survey will also always have data entry form view as an option. Right, so currently we're looking at what a data entry form might look like. This is a separate instrument, just a quick administrative instrument I threw as a mock-up. We are piping in some information here. We're able to embed that consent that the participant just submitted. We have a signature field, just like we would have on the user end. And as you kind of notice, right, this is a little less polished than the survey view, but it offers us kind of an easier way to navigate through multiple pages in REDCap. And we can also do a few cool things like check field history, right? So you might notice this really, really tiny, I'm going to zoom in super quick, H button that is basically translucent. When we hover over it, it lights up a bit, and that'll give us an option to view data history. So I can go ahead, click here, and this will give us a summary of the date/time of a change. So the last time data was entered into this field, who entered that data based on their user account, and what changes were made. Same thing goes for just a regular radio button field. If I go ahead and let's change these values really quick so I can show you what that looks like when updated. Go ahead, save, hop back in there. And we can see, okay, I have made an additional change. The signature file name has changed. We can see I've updated this response option to value 2. Right, so it kind of gives you that level of complexity that a participant might not need, but you are still able to monitor the progress and the activity within a single instrument within REDCap. Another item, and this can get a lot more complex, but there's a comment log. We can go ahead and comment within a specific field. So I'll go ahead and say verify Willis supervisor. We'll click that comment in. And now whenever someone is looking at this instrument, they can notice, hey, there's a little bit of color to this chat bubble. Let's go ahead, click on it. And I can see, okay, I made this comment at this time. My username is this, and this is my comment. One other aspect of surveys that I'd like to, or data entry forms rather, that I'd like to hit on that is not available in surveys is completion status. Right, so with a survey, basically there's 3 statuses. There is untouched, there is partially complete, and there's complete. Data entry forms offer something a little different, which is we have incomplete, unverified, incomplete. This variable is automatically set up on every single instrument you make within your project. These fields cannot be customized further. But right, these statuses automatically have different values assigned to them. Incomplete is assigned a raw value of 0, unverified a raw value of 1, and complete a raw value of 2. Right, so there are a lot of different ways to use these. The nice thing is they can be referenced within branching logic. So you can filter, let's say, a report, which we'll talk about in a little bit, down to cases where only specifically this form has been completed, or only instances where this form is unverified or incomplete, things of that nature. So there are a lot of cool ways to use that and kind of use it as quick internal comps. And we'll see a little more of what this looks like once we hit the record status dashboard. One last thing I want to hit on, we do have the ability when we are in a data entry form to go ahead and delete data for this form. I'll go ahead, click that. We're going to get a confirmation. It's going to let us know this cannot be reversed. So we'll click delete. And when we pop this back open, right, basically all the content is cleared. Comments do stick, and field history will also still appear. It'll say, okay, Sean Sullivan at this point deleted this data. Again, that way we can track, user activity within a specific record, a participant's record, and just kind of gauge what's going on that level. Right, so pivoting away from the more design-oriented view of REDCap, I do want to talk about participant management. So let's go ahead. We're going to close out of this guy. And what we are currently looking at right now is the record status dashboard. So this is a quick summary of all the records that are currently entered into our project. We get a quick record count, we have different pages, and we have a default dashboard view. This is what's going to be set up on your project. This is what you're going to default to. But right, this default dashboard view gives us a list of, again, all of the records that have been submitted for this project, the respective record ID, that can either be manually assigned or automatically assigned in sequential order. We also have the name of our instruments. So right in this project, we have a consent instrument, an administrative instrument, and this questionnaire right here. We can also kind of look closer at what I was just talking about a few seconds ago, which is the form completion status as well as the survey completion status. We have a nice little legend that will allow us to reference, but we can see red, incomplete, yellow, unverified, green, complete. Blank bubble just means no data has been saved. The yellowish orange with the check mark means it's a partial survey response, so someone started a survey but didn't complete it. And then the green with check mark means a survey response was completed. Right, so the record status dashboard is just a quick way of checking on the progress of my participants. I can say, okay, these individuals have successfully completed the consent. Oh, this is incomplete. I might want to check this out. What was my staff doing in here when modifying this field? Oh, this should be a survey complete. What might be going on here? And you can kind of get into that and give a quick judgment of, hey, this is what's going on with my participants in this study, or this is what's going on with my records within this study. We can also get a little more granular, right? And that can be done either through the add/edit records page, or we can go ahead and click on the record ID. This actually functions as a hyperlink. So if I go ahead and click this guy, we'll go ahead and we'll get our record homepage. And this is just an overview of what's going on within that individual record. Again, we can see our legend for the status icons. So survey completion status versus form completion status. We can also go ahead, open up any of our instruments. So let's say I want to take a peek at our consent that's been submitted as a survey. I'll click on this little radio button in the status column. That'll go ahead and give me an overview of the participants' responses. We can also see some metadata. So when was this response started? How long did it take for them to submit the survey? We can see all their responses, and we can still check that field history as well. We can see when these responses were submitted. We can also use this little sidebar here to navigate between a few different views. I can hop to the form that we have not touched at all, right, the questionnaire that I mentioned. And right, this is a good opportunity to kind of hit on, right, this is that data entry form view. However, this can also be accessed as a survey. Well, there are a lot of ways of distributing that. The quickest way, we have a little survey options drop down, and there are a few different modes of how we can distribute this. If I click open survey, that's going to open this as a survey in another view. It'll also give us a warning. You don't want to have it open in both windows. I'm going to go ahead and just say stay on page since we're still talking through this. And I can go ahead and I can click on the record ID again to kind of get that overview of this individual record. When you have a longitudinal project, this starts looking a lot more intense, right? We typically don't just have the single column. We'll have the name of our events within the project as well as the forms within those events. And this is really helpful to give a glance when you think, right, oh, did this participant complete the survey yet? You can go ahead, you can navigate to that record and you can gauge that and you can kind of see a timeline of where they're at. Now, right, we've kind of looked at the quick gross view of what you can do to check your record status as far as participant management is, as well as this little more granular view. But we can also do data exports and reports. Right, so on my left-hand sidebar, underneath applications, we have this listing data exports, reports, and stats. If I go ahead and click there, that's going to bring us to a new page. This lists any existing reports that we have in the project that have been built. Also gives us an option to view all of our data, export all of our data, or pull some stats and charts of all of our data. There's also a way to just quickly pull specific instruments. And then these are existing reports that I have. I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to create a report with you guys really quick just to talk through what the report creation process looks like, what those options are, and then we can go ahead and we can see how that factors in with the stats and charts feature, as well as the export feature, and also what viewing a report looks like. So I'll go ahead and click create new report here. Right, so I'll go ahead and name my report, simple enough. We have an option to set the report as public. There are very few cases where I would encourage you to set a report as public because what that ultimately means is anyone who has a link to this report will be able to see this data. Right, so of course we don't want PII, PHI available on this, right, because anyone could access the link if they were given it. So in most cases, I say steer clear of public reports. If you ever have a scenario where you think it might make sense or you have questions about it, feel free to reach out to our team. We're definitely happy to give our input. We can also go ahead and use a rich text editor to go ahead and give a description of our report. This is optional, but I could go ahead and just say, this is my report. And I'll show you guys what that looks like in a little bit once we get to the viewing stage. And then the rest of the report creation process is broken down into steps. So step one is user access. User access is broken into two different categories, which is view access as well as edit access. The naming is kind of intuitive, right? But we can go ahead and we can choose who is able to see this report on their left-hand sidebar, right? Because we have this section called reports on our left-hand sidebar that shows us, hey, these are the reports that have already been created for this project. If I don't want certain people to be able to view this report, I can go ahead, I can click custom user access and select the individual users that I do want to be able to see this report on their sidebar. Similar, but a little more dramatic on the permission level is the edit access. So I can choose who can edit, copy, or delete a report. Right, so this is great if you have a lot of users on the project and you want to make sure, hey, I put a lot of effort into this report logic. It's very complex. I want to make sure no one can modify it. You can limit who is able to modify that. That can also be controlled by user rights within your project, but this gives you another level of that control. Moving on, we can go to step 2, which is fields to include in the report. Right, so there are a lot of different ways to add different fields to your report. Essentially, what we're doing is we're designating what columns are going to appear on our final report. So by default, record ID is included in here. I typically recommend leaving that because that still gives us that hyperlink option where I can click on it and hop into an individual record like I could on our record status dashboard. I can go ahead and I can type a variable name. So I know I have signature. We can go ahead and pull that. We can also use this drop down and select fields that we might want to include in here. So let's do first name. We'll also grab more fields through the quick add. So if I go ahead and I click quick add here, it's going to give me a list of all the fields in the project along with some checkboxes. I can go ahead, I can click select all, I can go deselect all. And let's go ahead and we're just going to grab last name and email as well. And then the last way to add fields in step 2 is add all fields from a selected instrument. I can click on this drop down. That'll add all the fields from a given instrument. Let's go ahead and we'll just use that for our admin instrument. Great. And then we have some additional report options. Typically, these are considered advanced. I'm not going to dive into each in depth, but right, we can include timestamps, for example. We can change the way that checkbox responses appear within our report. We can remove line breaks and carriage returns. This is only applicable when we're doing CSV polls. We can choose whether we want to show a field label, a variable name, or both when we're looking at this report, and we can choose the same for response options. Step 3 is where we would introduce our filter logic. So we can go ahead and using the same menu options of either a dropdown, I can type in field names to start defining our report logic. This will determine what appears on this report when I go ahead and finally save it. So let's go ahead and I'm going to do something simple. Let's just go ahead and we're going to say our text field. So first name, I can choose an operator. We're going to say, we're going to show any records where first name is not equal to Sean. You can do this as well with, let's say, our radio button fields where I can say equal to or not equal to, right? Because there really are only 2 states here. I can choose which value. I'm going to go ahead and not actually include that, but you can notice as well, we can do ands, ors within this as well to kind of get that logic a little more fine-tuned if we have multiple criteria we want to filter on. And the other component to this, right, is I know Chloe earlier talked about the drag and drop editor versus manually defining logic. The same is true when building reports. We can also use REDCap syntax to go ahead and define our logic. If I click this advanced logic, it's going to go ahead and it's actually going to convert our logic to what that raw logic would look like. So we have first name, our field name in brackets. These 2 arrows mean not equal to, and then the text value we specified. We can also introduce live filters. Live filters are just additional filters that we can apply to the report where we can click from a drop-down and choose if we want to show something or not. So we're going to go ahead and we're actually going to grab 2 of these, record ID and completion. And perfect. Then finally, we have step 4, order the results. This is just how the results are going to appear on that final report and what order they're going to pop up. We can do ascending or descending. I'm just going to leave it with record ID. And finally, we're going to go ahead and we're going to save this report. And at this point, we're going to get a few options. We can view the report, which is what we're going to end up doing. We can return to the My Reports and Exports page, so that page I showed you earlier where we started this, or I can continue editing the report. So if I go ahead and I click View Report at this point, we can see all the details we already talked about, right? So you'll notice no Sean's in here, and I did have a lot of Sean records. We are down to 88. We have our report description. We can click on these little hyperlinks to access specific records. We can download different files if they are file upload fields like signatures. And right, I can get a quick summary of all this data. Oh, I can filter down using a live filter to a specific record, so record ID 26. A little more broad, we can go ahead and we can only show instances where the consent has been completed, incomplete, so on and so forth, or we can just change these back to blank. We can reset those. We also have a nice little search bar, so I can go ahead and just confirm, yep, we don't have any Sean records in this project. I can download all my files as a zip. And then the last components of this, right, we can click on stats and charts here, and this will give us some really quick and dirty descriptives on what we are actually seeing within this report, right? So we can see a breakdown of form status, for example, is going to go ahead and pop out in this bar graph format. We can also, if we had a number validated field, see mean, median, range, and things of that sort. One thing I do want to hit on is this is definitely not perfect, right? What you're going to be returning is going to be accurate, but a stats package is always going to be the best way to look at your data out of REDCap. This is just a really good way to glance and say, okay, this is what's going on with this subset that I filtered down to. So hopping back to the report view, the last component I want to show you guys is the export report button. So we can export data. And what that's going to do is that's going to export everything that we're seeing on this page into one of the following formats. So we have raw data CSV, we have a CSV with labels, and then we have a few different options for stats packages. When downloading these, we would also get the option for syntax files to be downloaded as well, allowing you to kind of work with that data a little easier when bringing it into your preferred stats package. We also have some de-identification options. This just controls what data we're actually pulling out, regardless of what we've included in this report. And then some advanced options, which typically won't come up, but we can dictate if we want to return form status, if we want to use a different delimiter, if we want to force numbers into a specific format. But right, let's assume I'm happy with all of my selections at this point and I want to export that data. I'll click this button. It'll take a brief moment to load, and then we'll get a summary of, hey, your data export was successful. Go ahead and we can click here to download that file. That'll go ahead and go directly through my browser's download. Alternatively, I can click send file, and that'll use something REDCap has called send it, and this is just used for secure file sends. I won't go too in depth here because I know we are running a little tight on time. So I do want to open the floor up for questions. If I can figure out how to share my slides again. And yeah, one quick thing, right? I know we've mentioned it a dozen times. We got it recently. We're very happy about it. We do have the Help Center now, which is an excellent way to reach us, and it helps us keep track of our stats too. So please use it. But any questions?
Okay, I'm gonna put in the attendance link for everybody in the chat. So please complete that. Thank you guys so much. This was such an amazing presentation. I've been using REDCap for years and I even learned some new stuff here. So thank you so much. This was fantastic and we really appreciate you going through that with us. That was really, really informative. So does anybody have any questions?
While folks are typing their questions, I just want to thank you guys for having us. We love being able to present information on REDCap. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch.
I might be reaching out. Awesome. So yes, please fill out the link, the survey. And then also there was a question about this being recorded. It is being recorded and we will post it within like a month or maybe 2 months, just depending on how long it takes our admin to be able to post it, but it'll be on that very first link for CU Data Week. It will, if you even scroll down now, you'll get all the videos from last year. So you will have access. We did record it and you will have access next year. or in a couple months. Oh, there's a question.
Can you share a bit more about the process of sharing projects with researchers from other sites? So just to clarify, do you mean as far as getting folks access to projects on your REDCap project, or do you mean sharing project templates between institutions? Okay, yeah. So your project. Great. Yeah. So I know within the knowledge base that we support and also that PowerPoint slide you can click to see more about getting accounts. But essentially, right, when working with external users, so from other institutions, we just have them go through our basic training. That takes about 45 minutes. Once they are done with that, they go through, there's 3 opportunities to complete a quiz. As long as they get an 80 or higher on one of those, they're eligible for an account. That will go ahead and redirect them to an account application. All they will need to do when completing an account application, at least involving you, is go ahead and list a sponsor for their account. A sponsor is just whoever they will be working with in REDCap, since they don't have the privileges to create projects. We want to make sure that they are actually being added, not just, sitting in the ether and just having an account without any access to anything. It also helps us make sure that we have the right person to reach out to in case anything is going on with their account and we need additional support.
I'll throw in a few links here too in response to your question.
And if they already have an account at their site, do they still have to do the training? Yes, unfortunately, since REDCap is used by so many different institutions, we just don't know the standards across each institution. Right, some folks just let their users have access, and it's all decentralized, right? So each instance of REDCap, as we call it, has their own user base. So we need to create a new account for that individual, and the training is still necessary. The one thing I'll hit on is if, they've spent years with REDCap, they can click through those training videos. We're not going to require you to do it. As long as they get an 80 on one of those last quizzes, that's fine in our book.
We have a question as well about slowing down REDCap more records for multiple data forms. This is a wonderful question, but also a very complicated question. It really I would say it's less about one particular thing and more about the overall complexity of your project. So if you have, several thousand records, and in addition to that, you have calculations, and in addition to that, you have custom event labels and record labels, the more complex your project becomes, the more likely it is to slow down. So, I mean, if you had the most basic instruments, with a couple thousand records, you'd still probably be okay. Wouldn't really expect to see any slowing. But the greater complexity, the greater you will see slow down. So there is no one true answer, unfortunately. Sean, do you have anything to add?
What I would throw out there is right, the only thing I've really seen burden projects over the years is a lot of calculated fields. We do discourage throwing a bunch of calculated fields into a project. Plus, REDCap just really isn't made for that. You're better off doing that in your stats package. It is good for quick things like a date diff or something along those lines. But you can get your project pretty massive. You can have thousands and thousands of records. I think we have a project with 100,000 as our biggest, and they still have decent performance with some basic instruments. So it takes quite a bit to slow down a REDCap project. And if you ever do notice slowness on your project, you can reach out to us. We'll try to help. Again, sometimes it is an old application and we can only do so much to support you. But we're always happy to comb through your data dictionary, say, oh, this logic might be able to be simplified. Oh, you have a lot of calcs. Let's try to figure out how we can cut back on those. And that's what our team is here to support, right? Is any general questions you have come up. And again, our support is free, at least to you, which is pretty nice.
Completely agreed. Yeah, calculated fields is a major issue, and that is the thing that we have seen most commonly. If you don't need it in your project in order for your project to function, we usually say try to go without it.
Thank you all for the great questions. And thank you again, Samantha, for the opportunity to speak. And thank you all for attending. We really do love getting the word out and we appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate you guys coming. It was a fantastic presentation.
Well, we are happy to stick around for the next 5 minutes in case anybody has questions, but if not, thanks for coming.